Hello everyone, welcome back to SSBCrack exams. आज के सेशन काफी इंटरेस्टिंग होने जा रहा है because here I'm going to discuss with you some basic questions that are usually asked in the personal interview of your SSB interview. जी हाँ, आपको पता है that personal interview में आपको कुछ questions का answer करना पड़ता है which your interviewing officer is going to ask you. और as per the recent year trends, we have seen that there are some basic pattern of questions that come every time that you're going for attending your personal interview. तो चलिए देख लेते हैं ये बेसिक क्वेश्चंस क्या है और इनको आपको घर से प्रिपेयर करके जाना है, एक आंसर सोच के जाना है ताकि अगर ये क्वेश्चन आपसे पूछा जाए यू कैन आंसर इट इन अ वेरी कॉन्फिडेंट मैनर एंड वेरी इफेक्टिवली. So first of all, they can ask you about the ranks of the officers. Now, if you're going for army, they'll ask you the ranks of the army officers. If you're going for navy, they'll ask you the navy officers rank. और एयरफोर्स के लिए अगर आप जा रहे हो तो एयरफोर्स के ऑफिसर्स रैंक के बारे में पूछ सकते हैं. सो इट्स वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट कि आप इन रैंक्स के बारे में जान ले. ऑल्सो यू शुड नो लोएस्ट रैंक क्या है और फिर धीरे धीरे अगर आप ऊपर उठते हो तो हाईएस्ट रैंक क्या होता है. जैसे आर्मी इट स्टार्ट्स फ्रॉम लेफ्टिनेंट, देन कैप्टन, मेजर, लेफ्टिनेंट कर्नल, कर्नल, ब्रिगेडियर, मेजर जनरल, लेफ्टिनेंट जनरल एंड देन जनरल. फॉर नेवी इट इज सब लेफ्टिनेंट, then lieutenant, lieutenant commander, commander, captain, commodore, rear admiral, vice admiral, and then admiral. For Air Force, it starts with flying officer, followed by flight lieutenant, squadron leader, wing commander, group captain, air commodore, air vice marshal, and air chief marshal. So you should know the ranking structure thoroughly. Then they can ask you about, if you're going for army or navy or air force, it's particular commands. So if you're going for army, they can ask you how many commands are there in Indian army and what are they. Now you should always remember that in the Indian army there are 7 commands, and here I'm going to also tell you about their headquarters. So it's starting with northern command, it's in Udhampur. Then western command, which is in Chandi Mandir. Southwestern command is in Jaipur. Southern command is in Pune. Eastern command is in Kolkata, Central command is in Lucknow, and Army Training Command is in Shimla. Then very frequently they ask you about the arms of the Indian Army and if you can name at least 3 to 5 of them. So basically you should understand that Indian Army is divided or organized into 2 parts. One is called arms, another is services. Now arms basically cover those troops which carry out actual operations. On the other hand, services provides logistics and administration for the army. Now arms is again subdivided into 2 groups, namely fighting arms and supporting arms. So you can name any of these arms. So I have named 3, like infantry, armored corps and artillery. Then they can very importantly ask you about the weapons. If you're going for the army entry, they can ask you about what is the primary weapon of Indian Army. So you should know that INSAS, which is the Indian Small Arms System Rifle, was the primary rifle, but it is being replaced by SIG SIG 716 and AK 203 assault rifles. So you should know about that. Then they can also ask you about the chief of staff of the 3 forces. So you should know about all the 3 forces. So for army, for army, that is the chief of army staff is General Manoj Pandey. Chief of the navy staff is Admiral R. Harikumar. And Chief of Air Staff is Air Chief Marshal Vivek Ram Chaudhary. So you should know the Chief of Staff of all the 3 forces. Okay, then they can ask you some basic science-based or technical questions. Like for example, you're going for Air Force entry, so they can ask you how does an aircraft fly? What are the forces acting on it? So you should know that aircrafts fly by generating lift, overcoming gravity, and there are 4 forces which basically act on an aircraft, namely lift, gravity or weight, thrust and drag. Then they can also ask you about different types of tanks which are used in the army. So primarily Indian Army operates the T990S Bhishma, Arjun MBT and T72 Ajaya tanks. So you should know about those tanks and their specifications as well. Then obviously if you're going for the Indian Navy entry, they can ask you about the nuclear submarines of India, very important topic. So you should know that India presently has 2 nuclear-based ballistic submarines dubbed as Advanced Technology Vessels or ATVs. And the first one, which is currently in function, is S2, which is INS Arihant, and S3, which is INS Arighat. Now, INS Arighat is in the process of construction. It's not yet completed. It's not yet a functional. So if they ask you about INS Arihant, you should be able to talk about it because it's the first indigenous submarine, and it's a 6,000 ton ship powered by an 83 MW's pressurized light water reactor fueled with enriched uranium. It is 110 meters long with an 11-meter wide beam and can travel up to 24 knots underwater. So you should know the specifications of these as well. Then if you're going for the Air Force entry, they can ask you about the frontline aircrafts which are used in Air Force. So you should know about them. They are Su-30 Mk1, MKI, Mirage 2000, MiG-29, Rafale and Tejas. Okay, they are the very important ones. You should also be able to recognize them and identify them. Okay, and also know about the specifications. Okay, now if you're going for Navy entry, they can also ask you, just like they asked for the Air Force, about how the aircrafts function and all. They can ask you about how does a ship float, what are the principles involved. So you should know about it. You know that a ship floats due to the principle of buoyancy, which is stated by the Archimedes principle, and they can also ask you to state the principle, so you should be able to state it. So namely, it's a principle where a body partially or fully immersed in a fluid is buoyed up by a force equal to the weight of the fluid displaced by the body. So you know the technicalities, of course. Now if you're going for the Air Force, again they can ask you about the latest procurements of the Indian Air Force from the US. Okay, that's very important. So India has currently procured C-17 Globemaster 3 transport aircraft, P-81 Poseidon maritime surveillance aircraft, and AMH-60R Seahawk helicopters. Again, you should be able to identify these aircrafts and helicopters, as well as tell them about their specifications. Very importantly, this is a very tricky question that comes, but ये नहीं है कि ऐसा आता ही नहीं है, आ चुका है, and they can also ask you to grill you. So basically they will ask you about to give the ranks of the Air Force and its equivalent in the Army or Navy. This is if you're going for Air Force entry. Vice versa can also happen. So for example, if you're going for Army entry, they can ask you give the ranks of the Indian Army and their equivalents in Air Force and Navy. So you should be able to know what ranks are equivalent to what other ranks in what other services. So for example, flying officer in Air Force is equivalent to the rank of lieutenant in Army and sub-lieutenant in Navy. For flight lieutenant in the Air Force, it is equivalent to captain in Army and lieutenant in Navy. Squadron leader is equal to major in Army and lieutenant commander in Navy. Wing commander is equivalent to lieutenant colonel in Army and commander in Navy. Group captain is equivalent to colonel in the Army and captain in the Navy. Air Commodore is equal to Brigadier in the Army and Commodore in Navy. Air Vice Marshal is equivalent to Major General in Army and Rear Admiral in Navy. Air Marshal is equivalent to Lieutenant General in Army and Vice Admiral in Navy. And Air Chief Marshal is equivalent to General in Army and Admiral in Navy. So you should be able to talk about the equivalent ranks as well. So please also learn them like this. Okay, then they can ask you about the different military operations for different entries if you're going for. So for example, going for Army, they can ask you about the important operations, military operations of the Indian Army. So you should know them historically, the years and for what purposes and what was the outcome. For example, Operation Vijay 1961. There were two Operation Vijays. One was 1961 for Goa liberation. Okay, another one was in 1999, which is the part of the Kargil war. Then Operation Blue Star, Operation Parakram, and various surgical strikes across the line of control or LOC. So you should know about them in details. Then, very importantly, they can ask you about AFSPA. Now, if you are a JAG entry, then obviously आपको AFSPA के बारे में पूछा जाएगा. So you should know about the laws and everything which a human being can exercise, or what they can't and what army can exercise. So you should know about it thoroughly. So basically, AFSPA is Armed Forces Special Powers Act, which has which gives armed forces special powers to maintain order in disturbed areas within India. So they can stop anyone, and they can also take people into custody whom they they are feeling suspicious or doubtful. So if they ask you currently AFSPA is in which parts of India, you should talk about it, you should know about them. So basically currently AFSPA is in some parts of Assam, Nagaland, Manipur and Arunachal Pradesh. Okay, so you should know about that. ओके, इंडो पाक वर्स, उस पे भी बहुत ज्यादा क्वेश्चंस आ सकते हैं बिकॉज ऑफ ऑब्वियस रीजन, आपको पता है, तो यू शुड नो अबाउट द एंटायर हिस्ट्री ऑफ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ पाकिस्तान एंड इंडिया. So India and Pakistan have fought several wars in 1947, in 1965, 71. आपको major wars के बारे में पता है, और numerous skirmishes has also taken place, including obviously very importantly Kargil conflict in 1999. Here I have given you a chart which talks about the India-Pakistan history of conflict with years. So I would suggest you to go through it and take a mental note of it. Okay, now days, very importantly, when is our Indian Army Day celebrated, or Navy Day celebrated, or Air Force Day celebrated? Very important, as an aspirant you should know it. So Army Day is celebrated on January 15, Navy Day on December 4, and Air Force Day on October 8. Please remember the dates. Okay, now talking about the missiles, they can also ask you about missiles, specifically if you're going for the Air Force, if you're going for the Army, they can obviously talk about missiles, specifically Agni missile. So know about the specification of this missile. You should know that Agni missile is a family of medium to intercontinental range ballistic missiles, which is developed by India and it is named after one of the 5 elements of nature, जिसे आपको पता है. Agni missile का long range होता है, nuclear weapon capable होते हैं, और surface to surface ballistic missile है ये. So should know about the different specifications. ओके, व्हाट इज मेंट बाय IOR, वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, बहुत रेयर क्वेश्चन आया है इस पे, पर आ सकता है. सो आई होप दैट आपको पता है. IOR इज इंडियन ओशन रीजन एंड इट इज अ स्ट्रेटेजिक पॉइंट फॉर इंडिया फॉर सिक्योरिटी एंड इकोनॉमिक रीजंस. नाउ इस पर्टिकुलर रीजन क्यों इतना स्ट्रेटेजिक है, क्योंकि इसके थ्रू different challenges are faced in maritime domain, including piracy and armed robbery, human and contraband trafficking, irregular human migration, illegal, unreported and unregulated fishing, gun running, poaching and maritime terrorism. तो इसलिए ये जो रीजन है बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. इंडिया का रोल क्या है, कैसे वो ये IOR को मेंटेन कर रहे हैं, या सिक्योरिटी मेजर्स क्या ले रहे हैं, इनके बारे में आपको डिटेल में पता होना चाहिए. Okay, then what is G-force? What is its significance to a pilot? Could be asked to any aspiring pilot going for Air Force entry. सो आपको पता होना चाहिए जी फोर्स इज नथिंग बट ग्रेविटेशनल फोर्स. और एक और चीज है, क्यों जी फोर्स इंपॉर्टेंट होता है पायलट के लिए, क्योंकि अगर एक्सेसिव जी फोर्स है तो दैट कैन लीड टू जी लॉक, विच इज जी इंड्यूस्ड लॉस ऑफ कॉन्शियसनेस ड्यूरिंग रैपिड मैन्यूवर्स. ओके, द पायलट्स कैन लूज कॉन्शियसनेस, इसीलिए जो जी फोर्स होता है उसको मेंटेन करना, या उसको वो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट पार्ट होता है फॉर पायलट्स. Okay, now many geography based questions can be asked, like what are some of the mountain ranges in India, because as a defense aspirant you should know about the geographical features of India. So they can ask you name some mountain ranges, so you can talk about the different mountain ranges like Himalayas, Aravallis, Western Ghats, Eastern Ghats, Karakoram, Pir Panjal. Okay, very importantly they can ask about Siachen glacier. It is the very important, the most important question that can come, and as a defense aspirant you should know about it in detail. Siachen glacier eastern Karakoram range में situated है, which is in the Himalayas, और ये अर्थ के, पृथ्वी के हाईएस्ट बैटल ग्राउंड है, जहां इंडिया और पाकिस्तान 1984 से लगातार जो है कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स में इन्वॉल्व हुए हैं. Also, both countries maintain a permanent military presence in the region at a height of over 6,000 meters or 20,000 feet. दोनों countries ने ही अपनी जो military presence है सियाचिन ग्लेशियर में बना के रखे हैं. Okay, now again coming back to the geographical features of India, they can ask you about the farthest places in all the 4 directions of India. So you should know about it. In north it is Siachen Glacier. In south it is Indira Point, which is in Andaman and Nicobar Islands. In east it is Kibithu, which is in Arunachal Pradesh, and in west it is Guhar Moti, which is in Gujarat. Okay, now they can also ask you to state some or the other principles if you are a physics aspirant, a physics student, or you have loved physics and all. So they can ask you about Bernoulli's equation, which is very important. यहाँ पे मैंने equation को आपको provide किया है. Okay, you can see it, right? P1 plus half of rho V and so forth. So यहाँ पे जो rho है it's fluid density, जो G है it is acceleration due to gravity, P1 is pressure at elevation 1, V1 is velocity at elevation 1, H1 is height of elevation 1. P2 is similarly pressure at elevation 2, V2 is velocity at elevation 2, and H2 is height at elevation 2. So you should know about the formula. Then talking about the different aircrafts which are used by the Air Force. So again, you're going for Air Force entry, this can be asked. You should know about the types of aircrafts used, and also you should know their functions along with some examples. So what are the aircrafts which are used in Air Force? Fighters, transporters, trainers, helicopters and unmanned aerial vehicles or UAVs. UAVs बहुत एक important role आजकल play कर रहा है in any war, so you should know about it in detail. Okay. Next, very importantly, is Archimedes' principle. They can also ask you, and its significance to the Navy for Navy aspirants going for Navy entry. So you should know about Archimedes' principle. मैंने आपको बताया था, it's all about principle of buoyancy. और ये क्यों important है Navy के लिए? Because it is fundamental for designing ships and submarines to ensure that they float and that they can navigate properly. तो ये था कुछ questions जो technical, यहाँ पे कुछ mixed questions आपको देखने को मिला था. Technical questions ज़्यादातर था, बिकॉज पीपल डोंट नो दैट कहाँ से क्वेश्चन आता है, किस तरह इसको रिप्लाई करना पड़ता है, आंसर करना पड़ता है. तो ये था पार्ट 1 ऑफ द बेसिक क्वेश्चंस दैट आर आस्क्ड इन एसएसबी इंटरव्यू इन योर पर्सनल इंटरव्यू. मैं इसका पार्ट 2 लेके जरूर आऊंगी. तो आपको अच्छे से पढ़ के जाना है, ऐसे क्वेश्चंस को अच्छे से डील करना है, यानी नॉलेज अपना बढ़ाना है रिगार्डिंग द फोर्सेस स्पेसिफिकली एंड ऑल्सो अबाउट योर सब्जेक्ट्स. ठीक है. और इसके साथ साथ अगर आपको अपने अपकमिंग एसएसबी इंटरव्यू के लिए फुल गाइडेंस की जरूरत है, तो हमने एसएसबी इंटरव्यू का ऑनलाइन कोर्स भी चलाते हैं. तो ये कोर्स बहुत ही फायदेमंद है. इसके थ्रू बहुत सारे बच्चों ने जो है रिकमेंडेशन हासिल किया है. सो ज्वाइन द कोर्स today, and the live classes for the February batch is going to start from 5th of February, which is on Monday. So make sure कि आप जो है हर मंथ इसके नए बैचेस स्टार्ट होते हैं, तो इनके लाइव बैच जरूर ज्वाइन कीजिएगा. ऑल्सो इफ यू आर प्रिपेयरिंग फॉर एनी अदर रिटन डिफेंस एग्जाम, उसके लिए भी कोर्सेस हमारे ऐप में अवेलेबल है. सो जस्ट डाउनलोड आवर ऐप एंड यूज द कोड warrior10 while you are subscribing to any course. That was it from my side. Very soon I'll see you with a second part for these kinds of questions, where I'll be discussing more questions for your upcoming SSB interview. Till then, stay tuned with us and always stay positive and motivated. Jai Hind.
अगर आप एक डिफेंस एस्पिरेंट हैं और एसएसबी इंटरव्यू, एनडीए, सीडीएस, एफकैट जैसे एग्जाम्स के लिए प्रिपेयर कर रहे हैं, तो आप एसएसबी क्रैक एग्जाम्स के कोर्स को चेक करना ना भूलें. आप हमारी लर्निंग एप्लीकेशन को गूगल प्ले स्टोर से भी डाउनलोड कर सकते हैं.